Okay, guys, so I'm going to walk you exactly how I make over $40,000 per month with this recurring business model using AI. So, as you can see down below, about $44,000 generated so far. Average price point is anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000, and it's super simple to fulfill, right? And I'm going to walk you guys through this just through a pretty ugly presentation, but I think the information is more important than the actual look of it. So it's exactly how I built a 40,000 a month AI agency over the last 90 days. I think it's actually maybe more like 100 days, but you guys get the point. Well, the service itself is quite simple. It's helping people apply AI systems into their businesses, right? There's an AI dialer, text, email sequence mixed with marketing slash like creating sales script and process for these businesses and develop a better social presence. So it's like a lot of things in one, right? But the great thing about this is I have things so systematized where it doesn't take a very long time to actually fulfill, maybe like a week, right? And this is actually something where people pay me $1,000 to $3,000 up front, and then there's a recurring model on the back end. And all the skills that I developed over the past couple of years led to this offer. So I'm not necessarily a newbie. I'm not saying that I built a $40,000 a month business without having ever done anything in my life, right? So let me just kind of show you guys where this all started. So I grew up with immigrant parents who encouraged me to go to college, but I really hated the idea of just going to college and waiting years until I can land a $50,000 a year role. At the time, coming from an immigrant background, $50,000 a year was like the big thing. That was the goal. If I was able to accomplish that through a salary, like I was set for life, right? Because we grew up in a lot of situations where we didn't really have money, so it was important to make sure that this kind of income is something that I was able to generate, right? I didn't want to necessarily let my parents down, but also knew I didn't want to go to university. I decided just not to go in the end. Instead, in 2019, I paid one of my previous mentors, named Ravi Abuvala, to coach me and learn systems integration. Funny enough, like once I was learning those skills, I was earning about 5,000 a month, which is kind of that $50,000 a year role if you really think about it. But the big thing for me wasn't so much that I earning that amount. It was more on the side of things that I had control over my income, right? In my head, I was like, okay, I chose this path. I'm working with business owners. So yes, maybe I'm like working a salary, but I'm working with these online coaches. At this time, things like this were booming. It was just kind of getting known and recognized. The systems integrators is this really cool thing where we can add systems and process to these businesses that are transitioning to the internet. And so it was a really great role for me. I was able to, make 5,000 a month with one person that I was working with, and then I was making about another $3,000 per month with a different business owner because it didn't require so much of my time. And so I was really happy. I was making good money, but at some point, I some of the business owners that I was working with, they had closers, right? I realized the 9 to 5 role style wasn't really for me. I clocked in, I clocked out. I saw salespeople in the channels making what I made in a single month in a single day. And not to knock on people, but I didn't, feel like there was anything special like that I didn't couldn't do myself. Like I knew I was capable of doing this, but growing up introverted, I was quite hesitant. My background was always like being that guy that was just doing things on the back end. Nobody really disturbed me, and I was all set, right? Pretty comfy salary. But I began to notice as well, right? My income did eventually get capped to my time. I also eventually learned and realized that I was always kind of like the back burner, the guy who just puts out the fires. And I'm not exactly sure what it was, maybe at the time looking back at it, but there was definitely like a level of kind of feeling like a cog in the machine at that point. What I had thought was like this ideal life turned into me really just working and slaving away, being pointed fingers at when something went wrong and just fixing it as soon as I can. I was like a yes man, right? A little bit, always agreeing that it's my fault, that I have to fix it, that I have to do this. And although I learned a lot of skills along the way, I just knew that I, was capable of more. And so I did eventually, realize that I'm not getting any younger and time isn't stopping due to my indecision. So I decided to just go all in on sales. Months went by. I started as an SDR, setting appointments. Then I turned into a closer for a high ticket offer that I used to do the operations for. I was dead last for quite a couple of months. I'm actually quite grateful. I think because I was still doing some operation things on the back end, I was able to stay on that offer. Had it not been for that, I probably would have been let go on like month two. I continued to practice. I learned this skill, and I went on to become the top closer on the team. So in 2022, I had hit my first $43,000 per month in commission within 30 days. I was on a higher commission because I was also outbound setting. And so it was the first time I've ever seen that type of money, but I was there. I was at the top of the mountain. What everybody strives to achieve. And right, this is in 2022. I think these numbers are thrown around these days in the high ticket space a lot more. But at that time, making that as a salesperson was totally out of the normal. And that was my one of my best months. I went on, continued to stay on the top for many years. I was able to, buy a home, pay off anything that I really needed. And I got to a point where I got really bored. There's only so much you can actually do as you continue to grow. And I was never the type of guy who would really like to necessarily flaunt a lifestyle. I tried it for a little bit. I'll be, transparent with you guys. But it just really wasn't my thing. I didn't really want to become a face or a personal brand. I just wanted to learn skills that I can develop and fulfill for and make a lot of money. And I like to build. That's where my background really came into. I got into sales because there was that idea that I was being pushed around and I didn't have the ability to communicate effectively. Once I learned that skill, it's like, okay, there's only so much sales objections and training that I can do and inner work to get better at sales that I can do. It's a full journey. So it's like, okay, it's not going to go away, but I'm also not seeing myself over the next 20 years being a salesperson on these different offers. So I was making a lot of money for my age. Eventually, I realized that there was a gap between my income and the owners, and it was only really between the skills that I had yet to learn. So I started taking less sales calls. I used that time as well to learn 5 core skills, which was how to create amazing offers, how to properly market those offers to the right people, sales I had pretty dialed in, how to fulfill on those offers, and how to scale. And that led me to doing a business model which is known on the internet as growth operating, growth consultant, whatever you want to call it. In short, I was helping online business owners scale past their current income through these skills, and I was paid a percentage of the net profit at the end of the month. I had clients who started from zero to $20,000 within 3 months. People exceed $50,000 months, some even over $150,000 per month. It was all great and sunshines and rainbows, but it can also be quite a cruel reality. The thing about this business model is if you don't really vet people properly, which is very difficult, right? When people don't necessarily have money, it's that idea that people talk about, like, money doesn't necessarily make you a good or bad person. It just amplifies who you are. And right, typically for beginners, it's hard to see who they really are until they start making money. In the end, it can come back to hurt you or bite you. So what had happened in some of these situations is, I had people that I helped scale to over $50,000, $100,000 a month, and we're like on a 20, 35%, percentage based on, what I helped them, because a lot of them started from a much lower income. And it was all fine up until we started hitting the 100K months. They started seeing those retainers or the percentages go out. And, I had people trying to use different payment processors to avoid being transparent about what they're actually making. So they would, let's say, have like a Stripe account and this other account, deposit, whatever, payment systems you want to use. And they would only show me one, even though they were collecting on the other one. All that to avoid paying the percentage of those. And so it's like, okay, well, that's kind of a battle in of itself. In the very beginning, I didn't really have contracts or much of those set up. Some of them were based on trust with previous friends, and, friends change when they start making money. And then on the other side, I had somebody that I was also doing this with who was helping me on some things as we were getting good demand. And then that same person that I was teaching pretty much took under my wing to learn these skills. And every single business opportunity I always presented ended up going out and looking for their own projects to avoid me getting a part of the cut. So it was like all these skills, all this time and effort to like train people, hire people, have somebody like in that management really high role, and I mean feel like was paying pretty well, right? More than more than the base salary or more than the average salary in the area, with a lot less time and work and effort while still learning a skill, right? Just again, helping people, those people kind of feel like they now have the skill and they don't need you, so they do the best that they can to avoid you participating and you making any money, which is fine, right? Like, I mean, I've detached, I've made a lot of money as well, so I've never so much been like, hey, like you owe me money and all these things. I feel like it's all like energy and frequency, and it's just not really my thing to go and chase money like that. But, I was still quite aware that these things were happening. And so that led to a lot of broken friendships, relationships, partnerships. You can only do so much of that and continue to want to operate on that type of business. So that's why in 2025, I decided to just go all in, start my own offer, no business partners unless I fully vetted them and just really had a good plan from the very beginning. I also didn't want to build an online presence. I like the idea of having a skill that I can develop and fulfill without really having to put myself out there, which is where I learned the AI skills. I've been providing these services to businesses for over 5 months now. And that leads me to where I'm at now. It's just me, one other team member. We're consistently growing month over month. The next goal is to hit $100,000 a month in recurring income. And that's why I create this YouTube channel, to really track and for you guys to all see the journey every step of the way. But I wanted to make sure you guys also had the background as to really how this came to be. Because I know in the internet marketing space, people like to really inflate the numbers. And yes, although I did hit that $40,000 within 9 back end, it didn't really come from nothing. And those same skills, I've done it and applied it for other businesses. So I had that confidence to say, hey, if I can do it for them who weren't as business savvy and just kind of had a rule book and a couple things to set up on their end, why can I not? And so follow me along with the journey as I continue to scale this business to over $100,000 per month. Going to really put this out there. If you have any questions, comments, anything, video recommendations you would like to see, things you feel like I could clarify on, feel free to ask in the comments. And yeah, follow along for the journey.